A janitor picked up her phone in the middle of a luxury hotel lobby, and spoke fluent Dutch. Within minutes, her manager tried to punish her. Within hours, the billionaire who owned the hotel demanded to meet her. What no one knew. She had 6 languages. A degree from Georgetown. And 47 ignored job applications buried in their system. This wasn't a fluke. This was the beginning of a corporate reckoning. Stay with us because what she uncovered next would take down an entire executive board. The Grand Empire Hotel in downtown Chicago glistened under the mid-morning sun. Marble floors reflected the cascading chandelier light like water ripples, and a faint hint of jasmine perfume floated in the air. Beneath all that grandeur, bent low with a mop in her gloved hands, was Janelle Carter. At 29, she had mastered the art of being invisible. She moved swiftly, silently, across the grand lobby floor in her standard-issue gray uniform, hair tucked neatly under her cap. To most guests, she was just the cleaning girl. No one ever asked if she had dreams, let alone degrees. Her work rhythm was suddenly broken by a sharp buzz in her back pocket. Her phone off limits during work hours. Rule number 1 from floor manager Karen Stokes: no phones, no chatter, no presents. Especially for the housekeeping team. Janelle froze. The buzz came again. Her heart skipped. It was a number she recognized. The University of Utrecht. She had applied 6 times 6 grueling, hopeful times for a graduate scholarship in applied linguistics. Each attempt had ended in silence. But now, the name blinking across the screen might just mean something different. Casting a quick glance around, she slipped behind a towering marble column by the elevator bay and answered in a low, cautious whisper. Janelle Carter speaking, a voice responded in crisp, fluent Dutch. Mevrouw Carter, this is Professor van der Lee from the International Admissions Committee. Janelle's eyes widened. Her posture straightened. Without thinking, she responded fluently, effortlessly. Goedemorgen, Professor. Dank u voor uw telefoontje. Good morning, Professor. Thank you for your call. In a heartbeat, the lobby around her dissolved. She was no longer a janitor. She was a scholar, a linguist, a woman of language. They conversed quickly, discussing her application, particularly the issue of her missing letter of motivation. Janelle explained in near-native Dutch that she had sent the letter on time but feared it was lost due to a server error. Her concern was clear, but her tone never cracked. Her Dutch was flawless, her pronunciation subtle yet precise. That was the exact moment the air in the lobby shifted. She felt it. The quiet. Janelle glanced up slowly and froze. Just a few feet away stood Nathaniel Brooks, the billionaire CEO and owner of the Grand Empire Hotel chain. He was flanked by none other than Karen Stokes, who looked like she had bitten into a lemon. Nathaniel's expression was unreadable but his eyes were locked on her. Janelle's throat went dry. She turned slightly away, whispering hurriedly into the phone. Ik bel later Tarek. Bedankt, Professor. I'll call back later. Thank you, Professor. Then she ended the call and pocketed the phone like it was contraband. Carter. My office. Now. Karen's voice was sharp and slicing, echoing off the lobby walls like a gavel on a judge's bench. The walk down to the basement-level administrative office felt longer than any stretch of corridor in the hotel. Her co-workers stared, some with concern, others with smug satisfaction. Among them, Janelle was the only black woman in housekeeping with a college degree. But that had never mattered here. As soon as the door closed behind her, Karen fired off. You know the rules, Janelle. No phones on the floor. Especially not in the lobby. Janelle opened her mouth to explain, but Karen kept going. And what the hell language was that? French? Dutch, Janelle corrected automatically. She regretted it instantly. Karen's face turned crimson. I don't care if it was Klingon. You were on the clock, on the hotel floor, speaking a foreign language into a phone while Mr. Brooks himself stood 15 feet away. The heat of injustice seared through Janelle's chest. The white concierge staff took personal calls all the time on speaker. But no one blinked. Janelle had seen it happen day after day. But for her, there was always a rule. "I'm assigning you to the convention center bathrooms," Karen continued, tapping her pen against the desk. Janelle's breath hitched. The convention center. It meant double-duty cleaning shifts, dealing with trash from corporate parties, and working late hours without overtime. "You'll be on that assignment for 3 months. Maybe then you'll remember where you work and who sees you," Karen added smugly. "You should be thankful I'm not firing you." Janelle didn't speak. Didn't move. Just nodded once and walked out with her shoulders squared. That night, her studio apartment in South Side Chicago felt colder than usual. The heating system groaned as she sat curled up on her twin mattress. Her framed degree in linguistics from Howard University decorated with minor international certifications hung askew on the peeling wall. It had once been her beacon. Now it just stared back at her, mute. 6 years. 6 years of mopping floors and scrubbing toilets while waiting for a call that never came. She had applied to over 40 positions, translation jobs, admin roles, entry-level communications. But every time she showed up to an interview in person, something shifted. They looked at her face. Then at her name. Then her hair. The rejections came in silence. Or worse, in thinly veiled apologies, "We're just looking for a better cultural fit." At dawn, Janelle dressed for work again. Same gray uniform. Same white sneakers. But today, she straightened the edges of her badge. Today, she would be unshakable. She arrived 30 minutes early, only to find the front desk ringing. "Janelle Carter," called out Marissa, the head receptionist. "Human Resources needs you upstairs." "Like, right now?" Janelle blinked. "HR." The Human Resources office was on the 28th floor right next to the executive boardrooms. That level was practically sacred. No one from housekeeping had ever been summoned there unless they were being let go. In the elevator, she stood between 2 executives in tailored navy suits. They talked mergers and development zones in Dubai, never glancing at her once. Same story. Different day. The HR director, Ms. Goldman, greeted her at the door. "Carter. Please, have a seat." Janelle's stomach dropped. Termination, she thought. Karen had escalated it. But then the director spoke again, this time, slower. "Mr. Brooks has asked to meet with you." Janelle's heart skipped again. The Mr. Brooks? The man with his name etched in gold outside the building? Before she could process, she was walking into a room larger than her apartment, carpeted in navy and gold, lined with books and cityscape photographs. At the far end of the room stood Nathaniel Brooks himself, flipping through a folder on his desk. Dutch. French. Mandarin. Italian, he said without looking up. Janelle blinked. "What? How?" "Your resume," he said, lifting it in the air. "I asked HR to pull your file after what I heard yesterday." Finally, he looked up. Bachelor's in Linguistics. Honors. 6 languages. Working in this hotel's housekeeping for how long? 6 years, she murmured. And not once considered for a higher role, he added, frowning. Why? Janelle steadied herself. "I've submitted 47 internal applications," she said quietly. 12 transfer requests. All ignored. By whom? Karen Stokes. And Martin Phelps from operations. Nathaniel jotted the names down calmly, his brows tightening. What Janelle didn't know, what no one on staff knew, was that Nathaniel Brooks had recently hired a private equity consulting firm to investigate unusually high turnover rates among non-white staff across his East Coast properties. Now, standing before him, was his answer. But for Janelle Carter, this was just the beginning. Janelle Carter stood motionless in front of Nathaniel Brooks, her breath shallow. The thick glass windows of the executive office behind him framed the city skyline so close, yet until now, completely out of reach. It felt surreal. Mr. Brooks leaned forward. "I've been asking myself a question," he said, tapping his pen against her resume. "Why would a Georgetown-educated linguist be scrubbing my marble floors instead of leading our international hospitality program?" Janelle didn't answer immediately. Part of her still wasn't sure this wasn't a trick, some elaborate humiliation or test of loyalty. But the look in his eyes wasn't condescending. It was calculating, analytical, curious. "I applied," she said finally, her voice steady. 47 times over the past 6 years. I applied for front desk positions, guest liaison, even night shift concierge. I was never even called for an interview. 47, he repeated slowly. That's not just neglect. That's obstruction. He stood and walked to the panoramic window, hands behind his back. You speak Dutch like a native. Mandarin, too? She nodded. Mandarin, French, Spanish, Italian, and I'm conversational in Korean. He turned to face her again. Have you ever been offered an interview outside this hotel? Yes. Once, Janelle replied, remembering it vividly. I passed the phone screening for a language consultant job at a travel firm. But when I showed up in person, they said the position had already been filled. Nathaniel didn't respond right away. His silence spoke louder than any words. Then, with a calm decisiveness, he walked to his desk and opened a drawer. From it, he pulled out a slim folder and handed it to her. This is a temporary offer letter, he said. I need an international relations coordinator for the Global Markets Conference starting tomorrow. Dutch and Chinese executives, heavy language demands, and a need for cultural precision. Janelle blinked. You want me to clean their rooms? He smiled faintly. No. I want you to be the face of the hotel to our most important clients. You'll mediate sessions, translate negotiations, and manage guest experiences. Starting salary, $5,000 per week. Janelle almost dropped the folder. I'm sorry, sir. Why me? Because you're qualified, he said simply. And because I suspect this hotel has buried a lot more talent like yours. Her hands trembled slightly as she signed the temporary contract. The paper was thick, cream-colored, so different from the rejection email she had saved in a folder called Keep Trying. Nathaniel reached across and shook her hand. Report to HR now. They'll issue your credentials, badge, system access, and wardrobe. You start in 2 hours. As Janelle stepped out into the hallway, her gray mop uniform felt heavier than ever. She took the executive elevator down to HR and walked through a door she'd passed 100 times but never entered. Inside, everything moved faster, the air charged with importance. The HR director, Ms. Goldman, handed her a temporary access badge. Your new title is International Relations Coordinator, she said briskly, handing over a corporate tablet and hotel login. Your system ID is activated. Office access on floor 27. Mr. Brooks has also requested expedited wardrobe fitting from guest services. Wardrobe fitting. Minutes later, Janelle stood in a mirror-lined room in a sleek navy blue blazer, black slacks, and a pale silk blouse. For the first time in 6 years, she looked like she belonged to something higher. Her badge was gold-trimmed. Her name Janelle Carter was etched beneath a title that felt both alien and deserved. When the elevator doors opened on the 18th floor, she nearly collided with her former supervisor. Karen Stokes froze mid-step, her mouth falling open. Carter, what? What are you doing on this floor? You're out of uniform. Janelle straightened her posture and offered a calm smile. Good afternoon, Ms. Stokes. I'm working. Under a new assignment. Karen's face twisted. Assignment? What assignment? You're supposed to be in the convention bathrooms this week. At the direct request of Mr. Brooks, Janelle replied evenly, showing her badge. I'm the new International Relations Coordinator for the Global Markets Conference. Karen blinked, her face flushing with confusion and disbelief. That's not possible. You don't have the qualifications for that. Actually, Janelle said smoothly, I do. Fluent in 6 languages. Bachelor's from Georgetown. Resume and credentials submitted 12 times to this very hotel. Perhaps they just never made it past middle management. Karen opened her mouth, but Janelle had already walked past her. The look on her face was everything Janelle had imagined in her darkest, most defiant dreams, but now it came with no vengeance, just clarity. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was claiming her place. She reached the HR department again, this time walking with purpose. Inside, a new face greeted her, a young black woman with striking braids and a radiant smile. Janelle Carter, she asked. Yes. I'm Tamika Langston, she said, extending a hand. New recruitment analyst. I started 3 months ago. I saw your file when I was reviewing hiring histories and couldn't understand why someone with your background was on cleaning staff. Janelle smiled for the first time that day. I tried to bring it up to Mr. Phelps, Tamika continued, referring to the director of operations. He brushed it off. Said it wasn't relevant to current needs. I'm so glad someone finally saw what I did. Together, they reviewed transfer documents, ID verification, and access system integration. Janelle's new access gave her entry to executive floors, staff command dashboards, and multilingual correspondence tools. Just as she was about to leave for orientation upstairs, she noticed something strange. A digital file on the conference prep server contained the welcome documents for Dutch and Chinese guests. Curious, Janelle opened the Mandarin version. Her eyes widened. It was wrong. Not just awkward, offensive. The document used informal vocabulary and idioms that were wildly inappropriate in formal business settings. One phrase, translated incorrectly, implied a power imbalance that could insult a major Chinese partner. She quickly opened the Dutch file, same issue. Casual phrasing, imprecise titles, slang expressions that wouldn't sit well in a corporate setting. She called over Tamika. These translations could damage our reputation. Where did they come from? Tamika pulled up the vendor file. Contracted through Whitmore Translations, she said. Approved by Martin Phelps and Karen Stokes. Janelle frowned. I've seen errors like these before last year, during the ASEAN Hospitality Week. Tamika's expression darkened. You tried to report it, didn't you? Janelle nodded. I emailed Mr. Phelps with corrections and suggestions. No one responded. Tamika lowered her voice. There's something you should know. Whitmore Translations. It's run by Martin Phelps' niece. No formal accreditation. But the hotel paid $48,000 for these. Janelle's stomach turned. She wasn't just dealing with oversight. She was staring at systemic negligence, favoritism, perhaps even fraud. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Mr. Brooks. Drop by my office when you're done with HR. I'd like your take on the Chinese reception layout. Janelle looked around the HR office one last time before heading out. She wasn't just stepping into a new role. She was stepping into a battlefield, one that needed more than translations. It needed truth. And this time, she wouldn't be silent. The next morning, the Grand Empire Hotel transformed into a hub of international activity. Black cars rolled in one after another, flags were raised over the entrance, and suited guests speaking Dutch, Mandarin, and German streamed into the grand marble lobby. Janelle Carter stood near the front desk, now dressed in a tailored navy blazer embroidered with the Grand Empire insignia and a silk blouse that shimmered faintly under the chandelier light. Her new badge hung proudly from her lanyard, International Relations Coordinator. She had barely slept the night before, her mind still racing from the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. But now, standing beside hotel executives and foreign dignitaries, she wore calm like armor. Inside the VIP prep suite on the mezzanine level, Janelle reviewed the welcome packets one last time. She had worked late into the night correcting every error in the Mandarin and Dutch versions, errors that could have insulted entire delegations. She had rewritten every line, clarified every phrase, and redesigned the structure to respect proper cultural hierarchies. "You're early," came a deep voice behind her. Janelle turned to find Nathaniel Brooks leaning against the doorway, sipping espresso from a porcelain cup. "I wanted to double-check the packets," she said. "These guests come from a high-context culture. The smallest linguistic slip can break trust." Brooks nodded thoughtfully. "You speak like someone who's done this before." Janelle smiled faintly. "Only in theory. Until now, no one's ever given me the chance." He stepped closer and picked up the previous version she had flagged. "Let me ask you something," he said, holding up a sentence printed in Mandarin. "What's wrong with this?" Janelle barely glanced at it. "It uses the informal form of partnership, which in Mandarin implies a casual or unstable arrangement. In a high-level deal, that can be interpreted as disrespectful or unserious. It might cost us the entire contract." Brooks whistled low under his breath. "Phelps told me we paid a fortune for top-tier translators." Janelle looked him in the eye. "Then we overpaid. And likely to the wrong person." Before Brooks could respond, a junior staffer poked her head in. "Mr. Brooks? The Dutch and Chinese guests are asking for the coordinator." "Time to shine," Brooks said, giving Janelle a short nod. She walked into the conference wing with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The room was alive with simultaneous greetings, handshakes, and overlapping conversations in English, Dutch, and Mandarin. Without hesitation, Janelle slipped between conversations, offering translation, facilitating introductions, and answering questions with poise. "Miss Carter," one Dutch delegate asked in a thick accent, "your pronunciation, did you study in Amsterdam?" "No, sir," she replied with a smile. "Utrecht. I studied their dialectal contrasts remotely. I've always loved the way Dutch modulates formality through tone and structure." The man grinned, clearly impressed. As she moved to the Mandarin-speaking delegates, she adjusted her posture, tone, and eye contact, subtle shifts showing deference and cultural understanding. One Chinese executive looked particularly pleased as she corrected another staff member's mistranslation mid-sentence. "Ah, you understand the difference between business harmony and business submission," he said in Mandarin. "Most Americans don't." Janelle bowed her head slightly. "Words are bridges. They collapse easily if not built with care." Brooks observed from the hallway, arms crossed. Later, during a break, she was approached by a man she had never spoken to before, Martin Phelps, Director of Operations. He had never acknowledged her in 6 years, not even in the break room. Today, however, he wore a polished smile. "Miss Carter," he said smoothly, "impressive work today. Seems Richards may have misjudged your potential." Janelle turned slowly, studying his face. "Thank you, Mr. Phelps. It's also impressive how my resume sent to your office more than a dozen times was never acknowledged. Especially considering the hotel paid nearly $50,000 for mistranslations I flagged last year." The smile on his face froze, tight and paper-thin. "There must have been a system error," he muttered. "I received read receipts for every email I sent," Janelle said, keeping her voice even. "Including the one where I corrected those same Mandarin errors you approved for the ASEAN Hospitality Conference." His eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing and walked away. Back in the HR office that afternoon, Tamika Langston met Janelle with wide eyes. "I found something," she whispered. "You're gonna want to see this." Tamika pulled up the hotel's vendor contract archive and scrolled to a folder labeled Translation Services. Inside were invoices, payment records, and approvals. Whitmore Translations had received over $180,000 in contracts over the last 2 years with minimal documentation of quality, and no third-party certification. "Look at this," Tamika said, pointing at a name. "Ashley Phelps. The registered owner." "His niece," Janelle said, connecting the dots instantly. "She doesn't have any formal accreditation," Tamika added. "No degree. No Mandarin proficiency on record. She's just someone's niece with Microsoft Word. And she's been paid 3 times the market rate," Janelle finished grimly. While qualified internal candidates were ignored. The implications hit them both at once. Nepotism, misallocation of funds, and racial bias were all converging into one ugly truth. Janelle leaned back, overwhelmed for a moment. But her resolve only sharpened. "Back everything up," she said. "Screenshots. PDFs, time-stamped." Later that evening, Janelle found herself alone in the executive lounge preparing the final drafts of welcome speeches and partnership documents. The lights were dim, and the city glowed beyond the tall windows. Just as she closed her laptop, Brooks entered quietly. "You're working late," he said. "I had to ensure the translations were airtight," Janelle replied. One wrong phrase could derail the Dutch-Chinese partnership proposal. He walked to the coffee cart and poured himself a decaf. "You know," he said, "Phelps swore we hired the best. Said his niece had experience." "She doesn't," Janelle replied flatly. "And the welcome packet you handed me yesterday? If it had been used, we would have insulted every Chinese guest on arrival." Brooks took a sip of his coffee. "So why didn't anyone catch it before?" "Because no one looked. Or if they did, they didn't care enough to fix it. They were too busy keeping people like me out of sight." He nodded slowly. "Well," he said, setting down his mug. "We're not keeping you out of sight anymore. Tomorrow, I want you front and center at the executive luncheon. And bring that evidence you've compiled. We need to talk." She watched him walk away, a new determination simmering beneath his usual calm. Janelle looked down at the folder in her hands, the printed screenshots, emails, invoices, and her own notes. A case was forming. A clear, undeniable trail. And this time, someone was finally listening. The next morning, a storm was brewing inside the Grand Empire Hotel, though most of the staff didn't know it yet. Janelle Carter stood by the conference entrance, greeting dignitaries in Dutch and Mandarin, her voice confident and fluid. But beneath the polished surface, her thoughts churned. She had barely slept. Her mind kept replaying the files Tamika had shown her: payment logs, fake credentials, and an alarming trend of systematically overlooked candidates who looked like her. She wasn't just the exception. She was the pattern breaker. At 9:45 a.m., she made her way up to the 30th floor. Nathaniel Brooks' assistant ushered her in without a word. "Good," Brooks said as she entered. "Close the door." Janelle handed him the folder. He sat behind his desk, flipping through each page methodically. Tension mounted as the silence deepened. 3 times the market rate for translation services, he muttered. Invoices signed off by Phelps and Stokes. No certification for Ashley Phelps. This is beyond negligence. He reached the last page, a formal complaint Janelle had drafted that morning, complete with signatures from Tamika and 2 former employees who had quit over the same hiring bias. "I need to know something," Brooks said, setting the folder down. "Are you absolutely certain about everything in here?" "Yes, sir," Janelle said firmly. "I've backed it all up: cloud, USB, internal drive. Because if we're going to blow this open," he said, "we're not putting a band-aid on it. We're ripping it out from the roots." Janelle nodded. "I've also been reviewing past hiring records," she added. "There's a 5-year trend of rejecting qualified non-white applicants, especially Black and Latina women. Some weren't even granted interviews. Others made it through, only to be ghosted." Brooks stood and walked to the window, hands clenched behind his back. I suspected something was wrong. Our turnover rates among multilingual staff were sky-high. I thought it was salary-related. He turned, his expression sharp. Turns out it was sabotage. At that moment, the door burst open. Martin Phelps walked in without knocking. "Nathaniel," he said, his tone breezy. "The Dutch delegation is ready to sign, but there's some confusion about the Mandarin translations. They think there are inconsistencies in the proposal wording. I believe Carter may have." He stopped mid-sentence, eyes locking on the open folder on Brooks' desk. Then he saw Janelle. "What's going on here?" he asked, the smile on his face faltering. Brooks closed the folder slowly. "Martin," he said, voice calm but clipped. "I've been reviewing translation contracts, specifically the ones approved by you. We hire third-party specialists. The best we can afford," Phelps stammered. "Your niece, Ashley Phelps?" Brooks asked. Phelps stiffened. "She runs Whitmore Translations. They're fully compliant." "With what?" Janelle asked. "Google Translate." Phelps shot her a venomous glare. "She's certified," he snapped. "No, she's not," Janelle replied evenly, reaching into her portfolio and laying down a printed email. "I contacted Peking University. They've never issued a single certificate to Ashley Phelps. Not in Mandarin. Not in anything." Brooks stepped between them, his voice now low and dangerous. "You authorized over $180,000 in contracts to an unqualified vendor, your family member, while passing over internal talent like Ms. Carter, who holds a linguistics degree from Georgetown and speaks 6 languages." Phelps turned pale. "I don't have to explain myself to." "You do," Brooks cut in. "To the board. Emergency meeting. Today. And I suggest you bring your resignation letter." "You're not serious," Phelps scoffed. Brooks stepped closer. "Choose your next words with care, Martin." For a beat, no one spoke. Then Brooks turned to Janelle. "Get ready. This isn't just about you anymore." 2 hours later, the executive auditorium buzzed with tension. Every department head, manager, and division lead had been summoned. Among them were the Dutch and Chinese business delegates, seated in the front row, curious as to why their luncheon had been postponed. Karen Stokes sat rigid near the front, her expression pinched. Phelps wasn't far, face unreadable. Janelle sat near the stage beside Brooks, clutching her tablet. The room fell quiet as he approached the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brooks began, "I called this meeting because a serious matter has come to light, one that concerns not only internal operations, but the core values of our organization." A massive screen behind him lit up. A presentation began, hiring charts, demographic statistics, contract flows. Each slide hit harder than the last. "For 5 years, this hotel chain has rejected qualified candidates, specifically multilingual professionals from minority backgrounds. Simultaneously, high-value contracts were funneled to unvetted vendors with personal ties to management." Karen looked stunned. Phelps looked cornered. Brooks gestured to the next slide, a list of rejected applications alongside resume highlights. "At the center of this pattern," he continued, "is a disturbing network of favoritism and discrimination." He paused, letting it sink in. "And yet," he added, "amid this corruption, someone quietly applied. Again and again. Despite every door being shut, she refused to give up." He turned toward Janelle and gestured for her to stand. "Most of you knew her as a janitor. Today, you know her as our international relations coordinator and the person who saved this conference from a diplomatic disaster." The room erupted in scattered applause, hesitant from the front, but growing stronger in the back, especially from housekeeping and support staff. Karen looked like she wanted to melt into her seat. "As of today," Brooks announced, "Martin Phelps is terminated for cause. Karen Stokes is suspended pending further investigation. We are launching a full audit of all hiring and vendor contracts across our entire chain. A gasp ran through the room. And finally, he said, voice softening, it is my pleasure to announce that Ms. Janelle Carter will be promoted to Director of Global Communications and Inclusion. Effective immediately. This time, the applause was thunderous. Janelle rose, stunned, blinking back the sting in her eyes. She saw her former housekeeping teammates standing and clapping, some with tears in their eyes. As she stepped to the microphone, the auditorium quieted. I never wanted revenge, she said softly. I just wanted a chance to be seen. To be heard. For 6 years, I walked these hallways as a ghost. But ghosts have voices, too. She looked at Karen. At Phelps. At all those who had once ignored her. And sometimes, they speak more clearly than anyone else. She stepped down to a standing ovation. Later, as Phelps was escorted from the building, his tie loosened, his face flushed, he passed Janelle and muttered under his breath. You won't last a month. Janelle didn't flinch. She just smiled, serene and steady. Inside the pocket of her blazer, her phone buzzed with a message from Tamika. We just got our first resume for the Invisible Talent program. From housekeeping. She speaks fluent Arabic and has a degree in finance. Janelle grinned. The revolution had just begun. 2 weeks after the explosive meeting at the Grand Empire Hotel, the ripples were still being felt across every floor, from the rooftop executive suites down to the boiler rooms. Martin Phelps was gone. Karen Stokes had been demoted and transferred to manage linen inventory at a budget chain across the state line. But more than the ousting of bad actors, something far greater had taken root, a movement. And it was led by Janelle Carter. The office on the 32nd floor had once belonged to a regional finance director. Now, it bore a new brass nameplate, Janelle Carter, Director of Global Communications and Inclusion. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see Lake Michigan shimmering in the morning light. A city she'd once cleaned toilets in was now hers to oversee, to reform, to serve. But she wasn't interested in window views. She had work to do. Janelle stood in the executive boardroom, facing a digital wall filled with live stats. Charts flickered, diversity ratios, promotion trends, internal application success rates. She addressed a table of regional managers, HR reps, and board members seated in sharp suits and cautious silence. Our internal audit identified 147 employees across 19 properties who are currently in roles far below their qualifications, she said. 83% of them are Black, Latino, Asian, or from immigrant backgrounds. Most of them applied for promotions. Most were ignored. She tapped a tablet, and the screen changed to photos and resumes. A pastry chef fluent in 4 languages. A bellhop with a master's in finance. A laundry supervisor with a law degree from Peru. The room stirred. I'm not here to shame departments, she said evenly. I'm here to change systems. This was the Invisible Talents program, Janelle's brainchild, an initiative designed to identify, train, and promote overlooked staff members across the company's entire hotel portfolio. The board had been skeptical at first until the financial reports came in. Outsourced translation costs have dropped by 78% in 3 weeks, said CFO Dina Morell from across the table. Customer satisfaction from international guests is up by over 40%. Negative reviews about miscommunication have nearly vanished. And we're just getting started, Janelle added. The success wasn't just in numbers. It was in the hallways, where housekeepers now nodded at her with pride instead of avoiding eye contact. Where Spanish-speaking staff had started language mentorship groups. Where guest relations staff requested cultural training to better connect with clients from abroad. The revolution was becoming a new reality. Meanwhile, across the country, others were watching. Karen Stokes now worked in a dim, cluttered laundry basement in a mid-tier hotel near Reno, Nevada. Her office, if it could be called that, was a supply closet with a desk and one flickering overhead light. She watched the internal broadcast of the Grand Empire's Diversity Summit from a cracked tablet issued to her on arrival. Janelle stood on stage in a fitted cream blazer, presenting side-by-side charts comparing the before and after statistics of the Invisible Talents program rollout. Karen watched silently, biting her lip. She had never imagined the janitor with the mop bucket would end up here rewriting corporate policy, redefining hiring culture, leading the future. But that's exactly what was happening. Back in Chicago, Janelle ended her presentation with a personal story. "When I was little," she said, voice steady but full of emotion, "my mother worked as a housekeeper at a hotel just like this one. She had a college degree. She taught me 5 languages by the time I turned 16. A photo appeared on the screen. Janelle at age 7, helping her mother fold sheets in a hotel laundry room. But she never got to use her degree. Not once. She applied. She hoped. But she was always told she just didn't fit the brand." The room was silent. "She died believing the world just didn't have space for people like her to rise," Janelle continued. "She never lived to see that her daughter would one day make the brand fit her." A few executives dabbed at their eyes. Others nodded solemnly. "That's why this work matters. Because the way we've done things, the way we've ignored potential and buried brilliance under uniforms is over. The real luxury we offer our guests is excellence. And excellence doesn't come with a skin tone or an accent." Applause erupted. "Not polite. Not polite. Powerful." Later that evening, Janelle returned to her office, exhausted but fulfilled. On her desk was a small envelope, handwritten in looping script. Inside was a postcard of the Amsterdam canals and a letter. "Dear Ms. Carter, I watched your summit presentation today. Yes, all the way from the Netherlands. You probably don't remember our brief call 6 months ago. I do. You spoke Dutch so beautifully, I was stunned. I followed your story with pride. And I would like to extend an invitation. Join us at the University of Utrecht as a guest lecturer in sociolinguistics and workplace equity. We believe your experience will not only educate but inspire. With admiration, Professor van der Lee, University of Utrecht." Janelle held the letter to her chest, tears rising to her eyes. A phone buzzed on her desk. It was Tamika. "Hey boss. First scholarship recipient just accepted. Daughter of one of your old cleaning team members. Full ride to Cornell studying hospitality." Janelle couldn't stop smiling. The Invisible Talents Fund, which she had personally seeded with part of her new salary and a match from the company, was now giving real children real futures. What had begun with a single phone call in Dutch had become a seismic shift not just at Grand Empire, but in the hospitality industry across the country. And it wasn't slowing down. A news article had just gone live. "From mob to management, Janelle Carter is transforming corporate America one voice at a time." Other hotel chains began quietly reaching out, asking about the program. Universities sent invites. Translation firms asked to be vetted. Minority job boards requested interviews. The New York Times was working on a feature. But Janelle remained grounded. She knew her greatest work wasn't in the press, it was in the people. She walked down to the employee lounge and sat among housekeeping staff, sharing stories, listening, laughing. She brought notebooks, asked about their skills, their dreams, their children. One of the older janitors, Manuel, looked at her and said, "I used to tell my daughter to never dream too big." "And now?" Janelle asked. "Now," he said, eyes shining, "I tell her to speak loud. Because someone might finally be listening." 6 months had passed since Janelle Carter answered a phone call in Dutch on the marble floors of the Grand Empire Hotel. What began as a disciplinary threat had unraveled a web of corruption, exposed institutional discrimination, and rewritten the internal rulebook of one of the largest luxury hotel chains in the country. But more importantly, it had rewritten the futures of people who had never been seen, heard, or considered worthy. Now, Janelle stood at the front of a glass-walled conference room overlooking downtown Chicago. A new meeting was about to begin, this time not an emergency, but a celebration. A plaque on the door read, "Diversity and Advancement Council, quarterly review. She adjusted her earpiece and reviewed the digital presentation one more time. Behind her, her assistant also named Zoe smiled. The two women had grown close, bonded by shared purpose and long hours. "Committee's ready, Dr. Carter," Zoe said. The title still startled her sometimes. Not just director but doctor. After her story went public, Georgetown University had formally recognized her work with an honorary doctorate in applied linguistics and workplace equity. Her thesis had never been theoretical. She had lived it. The wall screen flickered to life. Regional managers from 22 properties joined Viaduct video call, along with key HR officers, board members, and guest service leads. Janelle took a breath and began. "As part of the Invisible Talents Initiative," she said, "we've launched mentoring programs at all our flagship locations. Every promoted employee now mentors 2 others. We're up 230% in internal promotion rates for multilingual and BIPOC staff since last quarter. And I'm proud to report our employee satisfaction rating has reached 92%, the highest in company history." A round of applause filled the conference room. Nathaniel Brooks, seated at the head of the table, leaned forward with a grin. "This program was your vision, Janelle. But what you've built goes far beyond one department." She smiled. It had to. The problem was never just one person. It was a whole system of non-seeing. Brooks nodded solemnly. Across the country, other effects were rippling outward. Sarah Stokes, the former housekeeping supervisor who had once barked at Janelle to stick to mopping, had accepted a demotion and relocation after a thorough investigation. She now managed a laundry rotation in a secondary property in Fresno, California. It was a daily reminder of how far she had fallen and why. Meanwhile, her emails retrieved from company servers had revealed years of racially coded language, informal blacklists, and selective enforcement of rules against staff who didn't fit. She was lucky to still have a job. Martin Phelps wasn't. After his dismissal for cause, no reputable hotel chain would touch him. Word had spread fast: nepotism, fraudulent vendors, systemic obstruction of internal advancement. He now worked nights at a roadside motel on the outskirts of Flagstaff, Arizona, checking in travelers and avoiding eye contact when he recognized former colleagues in the guest logs. His niece Ashley had been forced to return over $80,000 in inflated contracts. As part of a settlement agreement, she was also required to complete a certified language training program and an ethics course funded by the Coleman Foundation for Inclusive Language Education. Ironically, it was a program Janelle helped design. But Janelle didn't focus on revenge. Her attention stayed on results. Each week brought a new message of hope. A maintenance worker in New Jersey promoted to assistant facilities manager after submitting a long-ignored resume. A kitchen assistant in Atlanta recognized for her fluency in Japanese and now part of the International Dining Experience program. A front desk clerk in Miami, once deemed not managerial material, now managing a guest relations team. She saw them. She remembered being them. One morning, Janelle arrived at her office to find a small white envelope on her desk. No return address. Inside was a postcard. A painting of a quiet canal in Amsterdam. On the back, a handwritten note in blue ink: "Dear Dr. Carter, I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to let you know that your story has been translated into over 30 languages. It's being used in training modules for diversity and inclusion in 3 hotel schools across Europe. Your voice has traveled farther than any plane ever could. With admiration, Professor van der Lee, University of Utrecht." Janelle placed the postcard on her bookshelf next to her mother's framed photo, the same photo she had shown during the company-wide summit. "I hope you're watching, Mom," she whispered. It had all started with her mother, who once folded towels for guests who never looked her in the eye. Who had taught Janelle words in different languages while they stood in bus stops or grocery store lines. Now, Janelle was ensuring that other daughters didn't have to start where their mothers ended. Later that week, she held a video call with the first recipient of the Invisible Talent Scholarship, a bright-eyed 18-year-old named Liana, the daughter of her former housekeeping teammate. I want to study hospitality management, Liana said, beaming from her dorm room at Cornell. And open my own eco-resort someday. You will, Janelle replied. And when you do, promise me one thing: hire people not for who they appear to be, but for who they are. Liana nodded. I will. I promise. Across the board, change was becoming policy. Not just apology letters or workshops. Reform with teeth. Janelle's team created an internal algorithm that flagged overlooked applications from the past 5 years. Hundreds of resumes that had been misplaced were now brought back to the surface and reviewed by a blind panel. The company's entire performance review system was redesigned to remove coded language like "not a cultural fit" or "lacks polish." And every new executive underwent a training program. Janelle helped write one that included real employee stories, names removed but truths left raw. Before the next global summit, Nathaniel Brooks pulled her aside. "We're considering you for the executive board," he said. "You'd be the youngest and the first woman of color. But it feels inevitable." Janelle didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out the window at the city below, the one she used to scrub, mop, and quietly exit each night unseen. "I'm not done yet," she said finally. "But when I am, I want that seat." He smiled. "Then it's yours." That evening, Janelle walked the halls of the Grand Empire no longer as a ghost, but as a guardian. She paused in the lobby where it all began. The same chandelier, the same marble floors. Only this time, she stood tall. As she turned to leave, she noticed a new bronze plaque on the wall, just beneath the staff recognition display, in honor of every invisible talent who was told to stay silent. "We hear you now. We see you now. We choose better." Her journey had never been about revenge. It had always been about redemption for herself, for her mother, and for every person whose dreams had been buried under mop buckets and polite dismissals. Janelle Carter didn't just rise. She lifted the floor for everyone behind her. And she made sure the doors she kicked open, stayed open.